Hi, I'm Venora. Do you know what it feels like to realize your own family wanted someone you love gone? They left my 72-year-old grandma in the middle of the Arizona desert, no water, 110 degrees, and called it giving her space. My mother's calm voice, my sister's fake concern. And me? I was miles away, staring at a blinking GPS dot and realizing this wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where? Drop a comment below. I want to know. Because when you hear what came next, you'll understand why, by morning, the police were at their door. I was folding laundry in the corner of my small apartment, the hum of the ceiling fan doing little to ease the stifling June heat, when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text, not even a call, just a ping. I glanced at the screen, expecting some app notification, but my stomach dropped when I saw it. Low battery alert, Marcella Wycliffe's smartwatch. Grandma. I blinked at it, frozen for a second, and then tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe they were out in the middle of nowhere. Service out there can be spotty. She'd gone on a family bonding trip with Mom and Clarice that morning, if you could call those two people family in the way that words supposed to mean something. I tossed the folded shirt aside and tapped the notification. The health app came up, showing her vitals, low but steady. Then I opened the GPS tracker, more out of habit than real concern, and that's when I stopped breathing. The little dot that was Grandma's watch was nowhere near the resort they'd said they were taking her to. It wasn't near a road or even close to anything resembling civilization. It was just there, stuck in the middle of the desert, miles off the highway. My phone said 110 degrees, no shade, no water. I sat there on the edge of my bed, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. No, this can't be real. I hit refresh 3 times, but the dot didn't move. Okay, I muttered to myself. She's fine. Maybe they're hiking. Maybe she wanted to walk. Maybe... I knew I was lying to myself. My fingers trembled as I dialed Mom. She answered after the second ring, her voice as polished and calm as if I'd interrupted her at a spa. Venora, can this wait? We're in the middle of something. Where's Grandma? I demanded. A beat of silence, then a sigh. She wandered off. She just needed space. You know how she gets. I couldn't even form words for a moment. She needed space? In the middle of the desert? In June? Then Clarice's voice chimed in from somewhere near the phone. You're being dramatic. She's fine. Stop overreacting. Overreacting. I swallowed so hard it hurt. I wanted to scream at them, curse, demand to know how they could leave her like that. But I didn't. My voice came out quiet, controlled. You left a 72-year-old woman in the desert? Mom's tone sharpened. Don't twist this. She insisted. She didn't want to come with us. We're respecting her wishes. Don't make this bigger than it is, Venora. I could hear Clarice giggling like this was all some kind of joke. I hung up. No goodbye, no fight. Just silence. The rage, the fear. They didn't erupt out of me. They sank deep, cold, and heavy, settling in a place that had been carved out years ago by every "you're overreacting," every "don't be so sensitive," every time they'd erased me or Grandma like we were inconveniences instead of people. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found a name I hadn't dialed in years. Arden. He was a wilderness survival instructor I'd hiked with once on a weekend trip. Someone who knew the desert better than I ever could. My thumb hovered over the name for a moment before I hit call. Venora? Wow, it's been a while. His voice came through, deep and easy. I need your help, I said, skipping the small talk. My voice didn't shake. My grandma's out in the desert. Alone. I have her coordinates. Can you meet me? There was a pause, then, send me the location. I'll grab my gear. As soon as we hung up, I stuffed my phone charger in my bag, threw on sneakers, and grabbed my keys. My hands were steady now. My heart wasn't racing. I didn't scream or threaten. I just grabbed my keys and whispered to myself, "Hold on, Grandma, I'm coming." But I had no idea just how far they'd already gone to erase her. I drove north with my hands locked on the wheel, the air conditioner barely keeping the heat from suffocating me. The radio played some upbeat pop station I didn't remember turning on, but it felt like it was 1,000 miles away. My mind kept circling the same thoughts, like a dog gnawing on a bone. Mom's voice, calm, dismissive. Clarice's laugh, that little scoff she always used when she thought she was smarter than me. And Grandma, alone in that heat, probably struggling to breathe. Every few minutes I glanced at the GPS tracker on my phone, making sure that little dot was still there, still unmoving. I didn't let myself think about what that might mean. By the time I reached the outskirts of Sedona, the sun was beginning to dip low, casting the desert in sharp orange and purple light. I slowed near the trailhead, scanning for Arden. He was leaning against a tan SUV, dressed in hiking boots and a faded ranger shirt, a pack slung over one shoulder. He didn't waste time with greetings. "Venora," he said, nodding as I stepped out of the car. "If she's where this GPS says, she's not moving by choice. We need to hurry." His calm voice carried a weight that shook me more than any panicked warning would have. I nodded and followed him to the back of his vehicle, where he handed me a bottle of water and an extra headlamp. "You'll need this. It'll be dark soon," he said. I wanted to tell him I'd packed water myself, that I knew how to handle a hike. But the truth was, I didn't know how to handle this. We started down the trail, boots crunching over the dry earth. It was eerily quiet. No birds, no rustle of life, just the wind hissing over the rocks. My chest tightened with every step. Then I saw it. A splash of color against the muted landscape, a purple lavender scarf tied to a rock. I stumbled to a stop, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. I knew that scarf. Grandma had worn it to every family gathering for years, even when Mom mocked her for clinging to old lady colors. She must have tied it there intentionally. A signal. My throat ached. "She wants to be found," I whispered. Arden crouched beside the rock, studying it with a professional eye. This wasn't dropped. She tied it deliberately. Smart woman. I knelt and ran my fingers over the fabric, memories flooding in. I was 12 again, sitting at the kitchen table while Clarice paraded her straight A's and Mom made her favorite pie. Grandma had come in, put a hand on my shoulder, and told me, "You don't need to be loud to matter, baby girl. They'll see you one day." She'd been the only one to stand up for me, time and time again. I swallowed hard and stood up, clutching the scarf for a moment before tying it back where it was. "She's alive. She left this for me." Arden glanced at me. "Then every minute counts, heat like this. It's brutal. We need to move." The trail grew rougher as we continued, the sun dipping lower and the shadows stretching long and sharp. I focused on my breathing, on keeping my steps steady, anything to keep from imagining the worst. I thought about the water bottles I'd packed for Grandma last week when she said she was going on this trip. I wondered how much she'd drunk, how long they'd actually left her out here. "Every hour matters," Arden said, his tone more urgent now. I nodded, staying silent. There was no room for tears, no space for screaming at the injustice of it. I could scream at Mom and Clarice later. Right now, I needed to keep moving. As the sky shifted from orange to deep purple, I glanced at Arden, who was a few steps ahead. His steady pace reassured me, even as my stomach twisted tighter with dread. Then, suddenly, he stopped. He raised a hand to silence me, his eyes fixed ahead. Slowly, he pointed. "Venora," he whispered, his voice low and deliberate. "Is that her?" I ran before Arden could stop me, because I knew if I didn't, I'd never forgive myself. The rocks scraped my palms as I half scrambled, half stumbled toward the small outcrop ahead. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I saw her. Grandma was curled under a shallow ledge, her sun hat still clutched to her chest like a shield. Her face was flushed, her lips dry and cracked. For one terrifying moment, I thought I was too late. "Grandma," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside her. My hands shook as I touched her shoulder. "It's me. It's Venora. You're safe now." Her eyelids fluttered, and she barely managed to open them. "Venora?" Her voice was papery, broken. Arden caught up, crouching beside us, his movements controlled but urgent. "She's severely dehydrated. We need to cool her down and get water into her slowly." He pulled a bottle from his pack, unscrewing it carefully. I slid my arm under her shoulders, lifting her gently so Arden could help her sip. Each tiny swallow felt like a small miracle. Then she gripped my wrist with surprising strength for someone so weak. "They took my bag on purpose," she whispered. The words hit me like a hammer. I froze, staring at her. "What? What do you mean?" Her eyes closed as if even that little effort had drained her. "They didn't want me to come back." I couldn't breathe. My stomach dropped as I remembered packing that emergency bag myself. Bottled water, protein bars, extra meds. I made sure she had everything she needed. And they took it. Deliberately. Arden glanced at me, his face grim but silent. He knew. A cold, clean fury washed over me, burning hotter than the desert air. My mother's calm voice on the phone. Clarice's mocking laugh. It all clicked into place. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. "We'll talk later," Arden said, his tone steady, breaking through my spiraling thoughts. "Right now, we get her out." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay, let's move." Arden wrapped a cooling cloth around Grandma's neck and poured a bit of water over her head to lower her temperature. I kept talking to her, my voice low and constant, anything to keep her anchored. "Remember those lemon bars you used to make? The ones you hid from Mom because she said they were too sweet? When we get home, I'll make them with you. You can boss me around in the kitchen again, and we'll sing that old church hymn you loved, the one you always said sounded better off key." Her lips twitched into the smallest ghost of a smile. That was enough to keep me going. We moved slowly, Arden taking most of her weight, me guiding her feet. The desert night crept in around us, stars blinking into view. Every step felt like a battle, but we made it back to the trailhead. By the time we reached the car, Grandma was drifting in and out of consciousness. Arden drove while I sat in the back with her head on my lap, stroking her hair and whispering over and over, "You're safe. You're safe. I've got you." The lights of Flagstaff felt like salvation when they finally appeared. At the hospital, a nurse and 2 techs met us with a stretcher. They worked quickly, getting her into a room, hooking up IV fluids, monitoring her vitals. "If she'd been out there another hour, she might not have made it," the nurse said softly, glancing at me. I nodded numbly, staring at Grandma as they covered her with a blanket. My rage simmered just below the surface, sharp and focused. Lorraine and Clarice weren't going to walk away from this. I stayed by her bedside, watching the IV drip and listening to the steady beep of the monitors. My hands trembled, but my resolve didn't. Then the nurse returned, holding something small. "We found this in her sock. It's addressed to you." She handed me a folded piece of paper. My name was written in Grandma's familiar, shaky handwriting. When I opened the folded note, my hands trembled so badly that I almost tore it. Marcella's handwriting was shaky, but I knew it by heart. "Venora," it read, "they said this would all be easier if I wasn't here. Don't let them win." The words blurred as I reread them, each one cutting deeper than the last. Easier if I wasn't here. I couldn't stop picturing my mother saying those words, calmly, like it was just another decision about rearranging furniture or buying a new car. I sat in the stiff hospital chair for what felt like forever, just staring at that note. When I finally picked up my phone, I wasn't sure whether I wanted answers or a fight. Lorraine answered on the second ring. "Venora, do you know what time it is?" Her voice was steady, bored even, like I'd woken her from a nap. I gripped the phone tighter. Why was Grandma in the middle of the desert with no bag? No water? Why would she write this? There was a pause, then her voice sharpened. She wanted space. We gave it to her. You're overreacting, as always. I could hear Clarice in the background. This is what happens when you refuse to let go, she chimed in, loud enough for me to catch every word. I bit back the scream clawing at my throat. She nearly died, I said, my voice low and controlled. You left her out there. You took her emergency bag. And I have proof. Lorraine exhaled like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Venora, you always twist things. She was fine when we last saw her. Maybe she wandered off. You've got to stop making drama out of everything. There it was, their script, pre-planned, polished, ready to make me the hysterical one like they always had. I hung up without another word. Arden had been sitting quietly in the corner, giving me space, but listening. They're digging in, he said softly. They've been planning this, I replied, my jaw tight. Grandma knew it, and so do I. I needed more than outrage. I needed evidence. Do you still have her smartwatch? I asked Arden. He nodded. In my truck. I also found this near where she was lying. He pulled a small digital camera from his bag. Figured it might matter. It did. By late morning, I was in the sheriff's office. Detective Moreno, a man with tired eyes and an unshakable presence, sat across from me, jotting notes as I explained everything. The GPS ping, the phone call, Marcella's note. When I finished, he leaned back. If what you're saying is true, this isn't just negligence. This is criminal abandonment. The words landed like a stone in my chest. Criminal. Part of me wanted to go public right then. Blast them on social media, call every news outlet, make sure no one ever trusted Lorraine or Clarice again. But then I looked at Grandma through the glass window of her hospital room. She hated scandal. She hated mess. And I knew exactly what my mother would do. Paint me as the unhinged, bitter youngest daughter trying to ruin the family name. They'd done it before. I thought about all the times I'd been labeled the troublemaker just for standing up for myself. You always overreact. You're too sensitive. Why can't you just be normal like your sister? Not this time. I wasn't going to give them an easy target. I'd fight quietly, but I'd fight smart. That night in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the photos on Marcella's camera. Most were blurry shots of rocks and plants, but then I found it. A clip. The camera must have been recording by accident. I pressed play. Marcella's voice, light and happy. I'll just grab a few more shots. And then Clarissa's voice, sharp and dismissive. Go take some photos. We'll wait here. My hand went cold around the camera. They hadn't planned to wait. It wasn't carelessness. It was a setup. I stared at the camera screen long after the clip ended, playing it over in my mind like a cruel loop. Clarissa's voice wasn't careless or offhand. It was deliberate. Go take some photos. We'll wait here. Except they hadn't waited. They had left her. Sleep didn't come. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed with the lamp throwing soft yellow light against the walls, replaying that voice over and over. Clarice. Calm. Casual. That same tone she used every time she got her way growing up, when Mom would say, Clarice knows best, just listen to her. I felt my nails digging into my palms. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling me. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the name that appeared made my stomach drop. Attorney Benson. Ms. Wycliffe. His voice was gravelly but steady. I thought you should know. Marcella updated her will recently. My heart thudded. What do you mean recently? Within the last 3 months? She left a substantial portion of her estate to you, he said, and Lorraine and Clarice were made aware of this update. I suspect you can see why I'm calling. The air in the room felt heavier. You're saying they knew? I can't speak to intent, Benson said carefully, but I can tell you this. She made it clear that you were her primary beneficiary, and given the circumstances, I'd advise you to keep all documentation secure. This may turn into more than a family dispute. I ended the call, my hands trembling, and pressed the phone to my forehead. They wanted her gone, not because she was frail, not because she needed space. She was in their way. My mind drifted back to the last family dinner at Lorraine's house. It was one of those evenings where the air itself felt like it was bracing for a storm. Lorraine was in rare form, swirling her wine and criticizing Marcella in that honey-coated voice she used when she wanted to cut the deepest. Spending money on these lost causes, Lorraine had said, glancing at me with that smirk. You spoil her, Mother, and for what? It's wasted. Marcella had put her fork down, her voice trembling with rage but steady. Venora is not a lost cause. She's my granddaughter, and my money is mine to spend how I please. The silence after that was suffocating. I remember Clarice muttering, You've always chosen her over us. I didn't stay long that night. I drove home with tears blurring the road, promising myself I wouldn't let them get to me again. But now I saw that dinner for what it really was. A warning shot. I took a deep breath and called Benson back. What do I do next? Gather everything, he said without hesitation. The note, the GPS logs, that camera footage. They'll try to spin this as confusion or a heat-related wandering, but those items, they tell a different story. Intent. Intent. The word stung, even though I already knew it. I thanked him and hung up, then walked to the window. The streets were empty, the night so quiet I could hear my own pulse in my ears. For the first time since all of this started, the tears came. Hot, relentless, years in the making. Not just for what they did to Marcella, but for everything they'd done to me. The forgotten one. The one they could insult openly at dinners, laugh at behind closed doors, dismiss as the dramatic daughter who never measured up. I sat down on the bed and cried until my chest ached. Then I wiped my face, stared at my reflection in the mirror, and whispered, They've underestimated me for the last time. I pulled out a notebook and began writing. A timeline of everything I knew, every call, every detail. If they thought I was going to sit quietly, they didn't know me at all. As I closed the notebook, my phone rang again. Venora? Detective Moreno's voice came through, calm but firm. We need you to come in. We've officially opened a case. If they thought I'd stay quiet, they were about to learn who I really am. The next morning came like a weight pressing on my chest. I had barely slept, my mind circling everything, the will, the footage, the note. But there was no more room for doubt. I got dressed with mechanical precision, grabbed my folder stuffed with copies of the evidence, and drove to the sheriff's office. The sky was pale blue, the kind that almost looks innocent. It didn't match how I felt inside. Detective Moreno was waiting for me, leaning casually against his desk. Venora, he greeted me with that calm, steady tone of his. Ready to make this official? More than ready, I replied, though my voice betrayed the tightness in my throat. He guided me into a small, windowless room, the kind of place that makes you feel like everything you say will echo forever. He laid it out in plain terms: reckless endangerment, neglect of a vulnerable adult. And, depending on what we can prove, conspiracy to commit fraud, those are the charges we're exploring. Hearing it said out loud made it real. I pushed the folder toward him. Marcella's note, the smartwatch logs, the GPS trail, the camera footage. "This isn't just about negligence," I said, my voice steady. "They planned this." He nodded gravely. "We're going to treat it like that." As I left the station, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. Lorraine. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. "Venora." My mother's voice dripped with that same composed venom I'd grown up with. "If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it. Family doesn't take family to court." I didn't flinch. "Family doesn't leave their mother to die in the desert." My words cut through her silence like a blade. Clarice's voice suddenly joined the call, mocking, "This is what happens when you can't let things go. You're always so dramatic, Venora. You'll ruin everything." "I'm not the one who ruined anything," I said evenly. "You did that when you decided her life was disposable." And I ended the call before they could respond. But my body betrayed me. My knees buckled the moment I stepped into the hospital hallway. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding, breath shallow. It wasn't fear. It was the weight of understanding that after this there would be no going back. Whatever fragments of family I had left would be ashes. I forced myself to keep moving, walking toward Marcella's room. She was awake this time, pale and frail, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Venora," she whispered, her voice thin as paper. "You're stronger than me. Do what I couldn't." Those words, they lodged in me like a stake anchoring a ship. I sat with her for a long time, holding her hand, humming an old hymn we used to sing at church together. I didn't tell her what I planned. She didn't need to hear it. She just needed to rest, knowing someone was finally on her side. Later that evening, I met Benson on a video call. His office behind him was lined with dark wooden shelves, and he looked exactly like what you'd expect from an attorney who had seen too much family ugliness to be fazed by any of it. "Venora," he said firmly, "from here on out, silence is your weapon. Let them talk. Let them twist themselves into knots trying to justify this. Every word they say will hang them. Meanwhile, we gather, we build, and when we move, it will be devastating." I nodded slowly. "You really think we can win this?" "I don't think," Benson said. "I know." When the call ended, I sat in the quiet for a moment, staring at the blank wall. The storm inside me had quieted, replaced by a calm I hadn't felt in years. I walked out of that hospital later that night, not as the forgotten daughter or the overlooked granddaughter. I walked out as someone who had finally decided to stop asking for permission to exist. My phone buzzed again as I stepped into the parking lot. Moreno's name flashed on the screen. "Venora," his voice was taut. "They've hired a lawyer, and they're coming after you." I didn't know their counterattack would be this vicious. The sunlight that crept through the hotel curtains felt hostile. I hadn't slept much, and when I finally forced myself out of bed, the last thing I expected was to be greeted by Lorraine and Clarice's smug faces on my TV. The local news anchor's voice was too chipper for the bile rising in my throat. This morning, we spoke with Lorraine and Clarice Wycliffe, who addressed the shocking allegations that they abandoned their elderly mother in the desert. Here's what they had to say. The screen cut to them sitting in what I knew was Lorraine's perfectly curated living room, sipping tea like they hadn't left their own mother to die. Lorraine was composed as ever. "Marcella has been struggling emotionally," she said, voice dripping with fake concern. "She needed some space. Unfortunately, Venora has chosen to twist this into something ugly. It breaks my heart to see her exploiting this for attention." Clarice chimed in with that little condescending laugh of hers. "She's always been dramatic. It's sad, really, that she's using Mom's health scare like this. We're just trying to take care of her." My grip on the remote tightened. I almost threw it across the room. Then another face appeared on screen. Dale Whitman. Even through the TV, his presence was suffocating. "If Ms. Venora Wycliffe continues making defamatory statements against my clients," he said, looking straight into the camera like he was talking directly to me, "we will pursue every legal avenue, including a defamation suit." Defamation. They were threatening me, the one who dragged my grandmother out of the desert alive. I stood there, numb, until my knees felt weak. They weren't just twisting the truth. They were burying it under a performance. My phone rang. Benson. "I'm assuming you saw it," he said without a greeting. "I saw it." My voice was tight. "They're threatening to sue me now." "They're bluffing," he said. "It's a tactic. They want you scared. They want you to fold. But remember, Venora, they're the ones on the defensive. We have the note. We have the GPS logs. We have the footage. Don't you dare let them intimidate you." I wanted to believe him, but watching them smear me so effortlessly on TV, smiling like they were the victims, it made me question everything. Could I really win against them? Against their money, their influence, their practiced lies? Before I could spiral too far, Benson's voice cut through my thoughts. "This is when you decide, Venora. Are you going to fight like you've never fought before? Or are you going to let them keep writing the story?" A long silence stretched between us before I said, "I'm not folding." "Good," he said simply. Later that afternoon, Detective Moreno called me into his office. He handed me a stack of documents. "We pulled some financial records," he said. "Lorraine and Clarice attempted to transfer several of Marcella's assets into their names 3 days before the incident. We're no longer looking at just negligence. This is inheritance interference. It's criminal." My chest tightened. This wasn't just about leaving Marcella to die. They were trying to erase her while she was still alive. Walking back to the hotel, I realized something had shifted in me. This wasn't about waiting for justice anymore. It wasn't even about confronting them. It was about ensuring they could never touch Marcella again. Legally, financially, emotionally. That night, I sat at the little hotel desk with my laptop open and started building a file. Every photo, every document, every recording, meticulously organized. It wasn't rage anymore that drove me. It was precision. If they pushed me one step further, I would release it all. And when I did, it wouldn't just bruise them. It would burn everything they'd built. But first, I had to watch them squirm in front of Grandma Rose. By late afternoon, I was driving Marcella and myself to Scottsdale. Rose's estate always intimidated me. The tall iron gates, the sprawling desert garden that smelled faintly of rosemary and mesquite, the heavy front doors that looked like they'd been imported from a European castle. Today, though, I wasn't intimidated. I was ready. Marcella sat beside me, pale but determined, her hand resting on top of mine as I gripped the steering wheel. "You don't have to protect me from this," she whispered, her voice still scratchy from days in the hospital. "I know," I replied, staring at the road ahead, "but I'm going to anyway." When we arrived, a valet waved us toward the circular drive. I helped Marcella out slowly, ignoring the stares from Lorraine's SUV parked nearby. Inside, the air conditioning was cold enough to sting my skin. Lorraine and Clarice were already there, sitting like royalty on Rose's cream-colored couches. Dale Whitman stood beside them, his hands folded in front of him, looking like he was about to deliver a press conference. "Venora," Lorraine said, her voice syrupy but laced with contempt. "Dragging Mother here in her condition? Really?" Marcella didn't flinch. "I wanted to be here," she said softly. Before Lorraine could respond, Rose entered the room. 92 years old, dressed in a deep emerald suit that made her silver hair look like a crown, she was still the kind of woman who made everyone else stand a little straighter. She took her seat at the head of the room and scanned us all with sharp, unblinking eyes. "I've reviewed everything," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. The video footage, the note Marcella wrote, and the attempted financial transfers. She paused, letting the silence stretch until I thought Lorraine might crack. "You tried to kill my daughter for money." Clarice shot up from her seat. "That's outrageous. Venora's manipulating everyone." "Sit," Rose commanded, and for the first time in my life, I saw Clarice actually obey her. Lorraine spoke up next, feigning calm. "Mother, Marcella has been confused. She doesn't remember things clearly. Venora has been coaching her." That did it. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "You didn't just underestimate me," I said, standing so they had to look up at me. "You underestimated the truth." Clarice snorted. "Truth? You mean the little stories you've been spinning since you were a kid? You're a manipulative vulture, Venora. Always have been." I didn't respond. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out Marcella's camera, and pressed play. The room filled with Clarice's voice, casual and unmistakable. "Go take some photos. We'll wait here." I turned the camera off. No one spoke. Even Dale Whitman looked momentarily thrown off. Rose leaned back in her chair, letting the silence linger like smoke after a fire. Then she spoke, voice low and icy. "You disgust me. Both of you." Her gaze cut to Lorraine and Clarice. "You don't deserve her name or her money. As of today, I'm rewriting my estate plan. You're out. Completely." Lorraine's mask slipped. "You can't do that." Rose's lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. "Watch me." The room was still ringing from that when the front door opened and Detective Moreno stepped in, his badge flashing against the evening light. "Lorraine Wycliffe? Clarice Wycliffe?" he said, his tone professional but unyielding. "You're being formally charged with reckless endangerment, conspiracy, and attempted fraud." The smugness drained from their faces. Clarice stammered, "This is insane! We're family." "Family doesn't leave their mother to die in the desert," I said quietly. As Moreno read them their rights, Rose looked at me, her expression unreadable. And when they were escorted out, she leaned toward me and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Now, Venora," she said, her voice low but powerful. "Finish this." And I knew exactly what she meant. 2 months later, I found myself sitting in the cold wooden benches of a Flagstaff courtroom, the kind of room that smelled like varnish and anxiety. It was sentencing day. Lorraine and Clarice stood at the front, wrists shackled loosely, the orange of their jail uniforms stark against the dark oak backdrop. Gone were their designer blouses and calculated smiles. Even Dale Whitman was gone. Somewhere along the way, he had quietly withdrawn from the case. They looked smaller than I'd ever seen them, like the walls themselves had shrunk them down to size. The judge, a tall woman with an expression carved out of stone, adjusted her glasses and began reading the charges. Reckless endangerment, conspiracy, and attempted fraud. Her words were steady, deliberate. "Clarice Wycliffe," she said, voice firm. "You are hereby sentenced to 9 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 5. Clarice's jaw slackened, but she didn't cry. Lorraine did. "Lorraine Wycliffe," the judge continued, "you are sentenced to 6 years in prison. You knowingly participated in and enabled these actions." The clink of handcuffs echoed louder than any sob. I didn't cheer, didn't smile. Marcella sat beside me, her hand resting on mine, quiet and still as a pond. She hadn't flinched once. As they were led out, Lorraine turned to me. Her lips moved. Silent words meant only for me. Maybe it was, "You'll regret this," or maybe it was, "This isn't over." But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what she had to say. When we walked out into the hallway, the desert light streaming through the courthouse windows felt almost too bright. Attorney Benson was waiting for us, his briefcase in one hand and a look of calm satisfaction on his face. "It's done," he said simply. I nodded, but my chest felt heavy. It doesn't feel like victory, I admitted quietly. It feels necessary. Benson gave a small, knowing smile. That's usually what real justice feels like. It isn't about winning. It's about stopping the harm. Weeks later, I drove Marcella back to her home in Sedona. She insisted on walking into her garden herself, slow and deliberate, leaning on my arm as we made our way down the stone path, the same garden she used to tend every morning before they tried to erase her from her own life. She paused near the porch, where her sun hat now hung on a wooden peg, the same one she'd been wearing in the desert. But now, it wasn't a haunting reminder of near death. It was survival. They took my freedom for granted, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in months. But you gave it back. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. You gave me everything when no one else would. I just returned the favor. We sat on the porch together, watching the sun dip low over the red rocks, turning everything gold and forgiving. I knew I'd never have the family I once wanted, the picture-perfect mother, the doting sister. That dream had died out there in the heat with their lies, but I had Marcella, I had Rose, and I had the peace of knowing I acted when it mattered most. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just knowing they can't hurt her again. And that's enough.